Alright, it's time for another episode of Missing Units of Total War Warhammer, and in this episode we're going to talk about two races, the Lizardmen and the Empire. I mainly want to go into one monstrous creature and a hero creature for the Empire. And these are not necessarily units that we will see be added to the game, but it's more units that I would love to see added because a lot of a variety that they would bring to the table, or just they're very iconic and they're not in the game. Talking about you, Beastmen, Taroks, and any of the other ones I've mentioned before. But I want to talk about the Troglodon, and that's a pretty important one here. So let's read this lore blurb, let's dive deep into them, because they kind of have a bit of a dual role, and kind of an interesting role for the Lizardmen. So here's the Troglodons. Their clammy presence revealed by ominous hissing, the great beasts known as Pale Death or Troglodons are amongst Lustria's deadliest hunters. Lone cave dwellers, Troglodons haunt subterranean grottos, emerging only to feed. These creatures are virtually blind, but hunt using sense other than sight. Swaying sinuously, the Troglodon uses its quill-like whiskers to track motion, while its forked tongue tastes the air. Upon locating its target, the Troglodon springs and bites, savaging its quarry with jaws full of hollow teeth able to pump forth noxious venom. The predator is known to spit this toxic bile, which helps the Troglodon triangulate their victim's location, and as the fluid makes a distinctive sizzling sound as it sears flesh. Skink priests claim that the twin-tailed beasts are marked by the Old Ones, the Serpent God, or perhaps both. The ferocious creatures are untamable, and all who approach a Troglodon provoke a lethal attack with one exception. A Skink Oracle, a lone skink spawned with a forked tail, can instantly tame the Pale Death, often adorning it with gems or precious metals to show its sacred status. The Troglodon deigns to serve as a mount for the tiny Oracle, and once bound into service, the loathsome beast will never abandon its master. Mounted on a Troglodon, a Skink Oracle travels the land, using his obscure divining powers to seek out lost artifacts of the Old Ones, or to investigate disturbances felt in the geometric web. As with the Skink Priests, Slann Mage Priests can see the world through the eyes of a Skink Oracle, and can cast spells through them. This telepathic link means the Oracles often appear just when they are most needed, further adding to the superstitious surroundings the mysterious skinks and their revered mounts. All Lizardmen rally at the wailing cry of the Troglodon, for its eerie call stirs their savagery and proves they have the Old One's favor. So I think that the Troglodon could offer a lot of really interesting mechanics to the Lizardmen. In our next DLC, we are hopefully getting our Skaven and our Lizardmen. That is yet to be confirmed, but it's kind of not been confirmed, but kind of been confirmed. Who the fuck knows? But Troglodons, I think, would be a really amazing addition to the army, because they bring a lot of interesting things to the table. As far as special rules go, they've got Arcane Vassal, which is not something that we've seen in Total War Warhammer. And in the video I'm going to be doing here on how to fix the Lizardmen and how to fix the Skaven, one of those things is Arcane Vassalage being entered into the game. And the way that that kind of works is you can cast spells in tabletop through an Arcane Vassal as if that's where your model is. Just as a for instance here, let's say your Slann Mage Priest is 36 inches away from one of your skinks. It's a smaller range, but I'm just trying to create a frame of reference here. With Arcane Vassal, you can cast spells as if you are that skink model, or whoever has the Arcane Vassal special rule. So maybe rather than it being exactly like that, because if you could see that really badly exploited, especially if a Skink Priest is on the Pterodactyl. I can't remember off the top of my brain the actual name for it. But if you have a Skink Priest on that could really be exploded. So maybe Arcane Vassal is a means of producing better Winds of Magic production, kind of like in the same way that Branch Wraiths increase Winds of Magic production if they're standing within trees. So maybe that's how Arcane Vassal is going to enter the game, but I really think Arcane Vassal is needed to make Lizardmen the true casting powerhouse that they're supposed to be. Not to mention how kind of comparatively weak the High Elves and Dark Elves are. Well, I guess High Elves mainly in their casting magic than they are in the tabletop. But I'm not pissed off about that. Let's just move on. Fuck. But a Troglodon is aquatic. It's cold-blooded. It's a large target, which a large target doesn't really mean a whole ton in Total War Warhammer. All large creatures can be shot in combat in tabletop, and that's true here as well. Poisoned attacks, predatory fighter, scaly skin, and terror. some of these things we obviously are not going to see make a translation, but poisoned attacks, that's huge. That's so awesome to see, because imagine a Carnosaur-like sized creature, because these things they came in the same box as the Carnosaur. So you could build it as either the Carnosaur or the Troglodon. That was the dual kit. And if you build it as a Troglodon, getting poison attacks on a creature the size of a Carnosaur in Total War Warhammer would be pretty awesome. Because on top of it, from the lore, we heard the blurb about how they can spit venom. And that is one of their skills here. They can actually spit venom in a pretty small range, a pretty high attack though, and it has a lot of wounds that it does damage for. So the way I could actually see this as simply being just like Throg's vomit ability, I could see spit venom being just like that. Or it's an actual ranged attack that the Troglodon has. I think that's a little bit more of a stretch and not as likely, because I think it would break up the way that this character is supposed to be, or the way that this model is supposed to be used, which is in close combat. But I'd love to see it so that spit venom does come as an activatable ability for the Troglodon. And the way that the worked in tabletop was that the Skink Oracle Rider and the Troglodon were one and the same. You didn't, if you killed the Troglodon, you didn't retain the Skink Oracle Rider. It was all on the Troglodon as far as wounds go. So I wouldn't see this as like, okay, the Skink Oracle is a caster, because he's not really. Maybe he has a bound spell or two if we want to really play into that, but that wasn't really the role of the Oracle. He wasn't a caster in this route. But he does have a Divining Rod. So I think it'd be awesome to have this ability where if you choose a Troglodon, you basically get a free Arcane Conduit in the Divining Rod. So it does kind of play into that further Winds of Magic bolstering that we really should be seeing the Lizardmen, making them those kind of masters of magic. Now, another ability here is Primeval Roar. And the way that this works is that all friendly units within 12 inches of the Troglodon get an additional attack on any successful to hit roll of 5 or 6. Now, obviously, we can't have that as a direct translation in Total War Warhammer, but I'd love to just see this as a slight increase to melee attack, again, in a similar mechanic to the way we see with Branch Wraiths, how they give that flat, I think it's 5 or 6 increase to melee attack and the aura around them. I'd love to see that incorporated with the Troglodon. So a creature like this that is massive, causes terror, it's a pretty terrifying target in and of its own right. I would say that it's got AP, but we already kind of see that on the Carnosaur, right? I think having poison attacks is pretty scary, because there are some units in the game that can get away from a Carnosaur charge, right? You can screen in some Spearmen or other Cav units to absorb the Carnosaur charge while you get whatever unit that thing was attacking out of the situation, preferably a character or a hero. Now, with poisoned attacks, that makes that a lot harder of a situation. And I think that's a little bit cooler here, is if you have an ability to range poison attack with spit venom, and then once you get up close and personal, you then can actually do some attacks through just the melee combat. And I think the Troglodon itself adds a lot to the tabletop in a cool way. Or I'm sorry, to Total War Warhammer in a cool way, because it's a different Carnosaur. We've seen so many Carnosaurs and variations thus of, and it's this blind Carnosaur basically. It's the same damn size. And it's got this oracle on top, kind of lending more to that, to a casting lord. Like maybe if you're going with a Slann Mage Priest, or if you're going with Mazdamundi, it makes sense to take the Troglodon, because it gives you a little bit more stopping and staying power, but at the same time accessorizes like it's a handbag. It supplements your casting abilities. And in fact, you can actually upgrade the Troglodon in tabletop. I think it was that you could give it I think you could give it armor piercing. Oh, I'm thinking of the Ripperdactyl. Sorry, I was looking at some of the character mounts here, and I thought I saw Troglodon, but it was a Ripperdactyl that I was looking at. I was like, I don't remember them having armor piercing. And then I saw Flying Cavalry. I'm like, ah, you're an idiot. But let's talk about the other unit I want to go into, which is the Engineer. And I've kind of touched on this before. I just think it deserves its own video to kind of, I guess, have me ramble. But the Master Engineer for the Empire, I think, is both lacking in the sense that it needs to be added. We have the Gunnery Right, or White, for the Vampire Coast, and we have a similar mechanic with the Dwarfs. I think that the Master Engineer needs to be there for the Empire to kind of like put them on that equal footing when it comes to being a truly devastating gunpowder faction. And the Master Engineer brings a lot to the table that isn't really I guess, exemplified in their special rules, but the way that Creative Assembly has approached these guys has been pretty great. So let's read their lore blurb here. It's a pretty sizable one. Master engineers are eccentric individuals who are obsessed with designing new machines and technological marvels. Many are also gifted artists, writers, and musicians, for inventing is just one avenue for their creative thoughts to express themselves. When their energies are focused in the workshops of the Imperial Engineers School, they can be found tinkering with half-finished inventions and developing new technological weapons for the Emperor's arsenal. Master engineers can be struck by inspiration for a novel war machine at any time, and when a new idea gets stuck in their heads, they will become totally absorbed with its creation, eschewing distractions like food or sleep until they see their vision realized. These inventors tend to mutter incomprehensible gobbledygook to themselves as they bustle from one machine to another in an attempt to improve their performance. Normal citizens of the Empire quite rightly think engineers are a little bit mad, and they try to avoid them whenever possible. The contraptions engineers bring to the battle range from utterly lethal devices such as the steam tank and the Hellstorm rocket batteries, to the downright bizarre such as von Huygens Terror Bell, the Thunder Barrel, the Hurlstell Wendler Pigeon Bomb, or a whole array of other deadly devices. These inventions rarely work, or at least not in the intended way, but every now and again a master engineer will succeed in creating a new and strange war machine that can have quite lethal consequences, usually, but not always, for the enemy. The youngest engineers show a burning desire to personally try out their latest inventions on the battlefield. The older master engineers have seen enough malfunctions in their time to know better than to field test the devices themselves. Instead, they prefer to entrust their prototypes to some eager, youthful fellow whilst they observe from a safe distance. However, it is not just their position as inventors and suppliers of deadly weapons that make master engineers valuable on the battlefield. While they are not soldiers, master engineers are still part of the Emperor's forces. They can often be found taking advantage of battlefield conditions to snipe at the enemy with a variety of powerful experimental rifles and handguns. However, sometimes master engineers just can't resist the appeal of being in charge of the really big guns. On the battlefield, individuals from the Imperial Engineers School attend to the artillery of the Empire forces, making small adjustments here and there as the battle rages and ensuring that the war machines function correctly. Engineers also tend to oversee the deployment of the army's artillery pieces, baffling gunners with talk of parabolic arcs, trajectories, and wind speeds. Artillery crews often resent the presence of master engineers, seeing them as pompous bookworms who get in the way with lofty academic theories and no real practical experience. However, many a gunner has had to swallow his own words after seeing the effect of an engineer's labors. An entire enemy regiment being shredded by a direct hit from a mortar shell, a whole cavalry column torn asunder by a well-placed cannonball, or a ferocious monster suffering the full onslaught of a Hellblaster volley gun. Whether the carnage caused was the result of a careful calculation or just blind luck, the feeling seems to be that the presence of a master engineer really does make their artillery more reliable and accurate. Most of the time, anyway. That was a doozy, right? That was a big one. So, there really isn't a ton of special rules for these guys, and I think that that is great. That gives Creative Assembly the tools to make these guys really awesome. And we see a lot of really cool abilities with the Dwarf Engineer. We see a lot of really cool ones with the Gunnery Wight and their ability to replenish ammunition, which is huge. I think that is so massive for an engineer, and I wish the Dwarf Engineer had that same ability here. But I think the Master Engineer needs to be a little bit more than that. Just like we see with the Dwarf Engineer, it should increase the accuracy, the explosive damage, maybe the AP damage of an actual artillery piece. But what would also be interesting is, like we see with the Necrotechs, right? How they can repair constructs. I love to see that with the Master Engineer, the ability to repair a steam tank and outright heal it. But I do believe that steam tanks can be healed from the lore of life, so there's a bit of a dangerous ground there. But I still would really like to see Master Engineers kind of falling into their place of these guys that are these tinkers, these inventors that do kind of repair and construct things, but at the same time are also masters of artillery pieces, to have it so that your Hellstorm rocket batteries aren't going to be shooting as wildly, so that all of your Hellblaster volley gun, I just said those, but your Hellblaster volley guns are a little bit more on target. You know, just stuff like that makes it a little bit better when you're using artillery pieces. And even so, to give these guys a very long range sniper rifle as well, because that'd be pretty awesome. That's in tabletop. It's true to form here. Their special rule, Master Ballistics, works like this, and this is the tabletop special rule. If a Master Engineer is not fleeing, a single war machine within 3 inches of him can use his ballistic skill and re-roll 1 artillery dice during the shooting phase. And this is very similar to the way that the Dwarf Engineer works. His ballistic skill, though, in the game is not very impressive. It's only 4, which is not good. Elves have a standard 4 ballistic skill, so to give you an idea, it's no better than a normal High Elf Archer for the most part. At least, I think it was 4. I might be getting that confused with old Space Marines, which everyone was a fucking 4. But still, my point remains here, though, that the Master Engineer should be this way to bolster a gunpowder faction, which is kind of starting to fall to the wayside behind the Vampire Coast. The Vampire Coast right now, as of the publishing of this video, is like the quote-unquote premier gunpowder faction. They're just very strong. They can bring such a wide variety of gunpowder from not only artillery pieces, but also from their gunnery whites, from their individual handguns to their individual pistols. They just have so much at their disposal. And I think the Empire has to step back up as that re-emerging master of gunpowder along with the dwarves. And I think the Master Engineer is a great way to kind of put that into perspective as well as bolster that ability. That kind of sums up our missing units of Total War Warhammer here today. Went in with the Master Engineer and the Troglodon. There's other missing units you'd like to hear me talk about, please by all means. I was going to do a Greenskins edition and talk about the Spear Chukka and the Snotling Pump Wagon. But the Snotling Pump Wagon is just not very cool, and if they add it into the game, I'd just kind of be like, meh. And I think the Spear Chukka needs a larger discussion about the effectiveness of ballistas in Total War Warhammer. They were very strong in tabletop because you could skewer through multiple ranks, and that's how I would really structure the Spear Chukka. So if there's something else you want to hear me talk about alongside the Spear Chukka, please by all means let me know below. I'll definitely think of something. But enjoy the weekend here today, guys. I got plenty of other videos planned for you. I've been working on my Primarch Sanguinius video, an End Times video on the Empire. I got another one up my sleeve here and some other 40k stuff, Battlefield Gothic. So I've been kind of slow to upload, but that's by no means because I'm not very busy on thinking of stuff to do here. But hopefully you've enjoyed this video here today. As always, though, have a good one and take care.